In some ways, it feels like the industry hasn't evolved. In other ways, you think when you look back that 20 years, how far it's all come on. Advisor firms are really overwhelmed with the choice. And it's so easy to say, we'll just take bits of tech in here and add tech in there. And they haven't really had the chance to fully consider the implications of doing that.
Welcome to the Digital Customer Communications podcast, where we discover how leading regulated companies engage, retain, and delight customers at scale. Joining us is Helen Clark, founder of Mint Blue Consulting, who specialise in operational change and project management in financial services. Helen shares insights on how client-advisor relationships are shifting and what firms can do to adapt their communication strategies. Hi, Helen.
Hi, Sam. Nice to see you.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in financial services when it comes to customer communications today?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. We've obviously seen a lot of change since the pandemic. Like anything like that, it accelerates innovation. So we've seen mass adoption of systems like Zoom and Teams and Slack, and they've all become the norm. But actually at the moment, in particular, advisor firms are really overwhelmed with the choice. And it's so easy to say, we'll just take bits of tech in here and add tech in there. And they haven't really had the chance to fully consider the implications of doing that. We also need to remember what it's like from the client perspective. And I think it's really easy to get lost around that. Not everybody wants or can use digital communication. Adoption takes a lot of time and effort. Trust is actually another issue. I've got friends who don't even want to do online banking. One in particular just reluctantly taking it on. There's that element of trust, particularly when you're getting cybersecurity issues. And internet communication is not as consistent across the country as you would think. So where you're in towns, it tends to be 4G, 5G. I know everybody's not a fan of 5G. I get it totally. But even I notice as I'm moving around, it will switch to 3G. And then all of a sudden you can't access certain applications. You've got to wait until you're in another part of the country. But once you're in the countryside, I know other people within the industry, and they haven't been able to actually get any sensible internet communication. And that's not even on the client side. So one person in particular has just had to go with Skylink to actually get anything. The other part is all the legacy systems. So the advisor firms are really innovating quite fast. They might be overwhelmed at times with what's out there, but there is a huge amount of tech that's come on board, particularly this year. But providers are really struggling in the background. There's been a number of different mergers over the years, and they're left with huge legacy systems. They built the first proprietary systems back in the sort of 70s, early 80s, and really building the systems they needed for theirs. But where you're bringing all these firms together, and policies just don't go away. You know, some of them can take 40 plus years to actually come to fruition, particularly if they were set for retirement. You think about the old 226s. Policies out there, or you might have a with profits. Moving these policies across takes time. So we're in a situation, for instance, where digital signatures, you really want those to be working to keep up with all the tech that's coming from the advisor side. And that's really tricky because there are still policy types that need a wet signature. So you've got those different combinations across the new tech coming in and what you're battling with the old tech and what clients actually want to take on as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. There's obviously compliance is a big issue in financial services as well. That kind of plays with all of those other elements. Can you talk a little bit to, I suppose, how firms can balance compliance with the need for enhancing their customer communications and, you know, getting on board with newer technologies?
Yeah, and I think they sort of go hand in hand, really. I was thinking about all of this the other day, you know, where compliance comes in. We need to think about what the client wants from an online perspective, and ignoring everything that's going on the advisor side. Ultimately, clients just want online signatures. They want secure messaging. They want to know that any messaging they're sending is going to meet the GDPR requirements. It's going to be held securely. And that's why we have all the different elements around that. They want easy access, want easy reading. So utopia is where you've got management responsibility within the advisor firm. So that comes under SM and CR. You've got clean data that's governed by GDPR. We'd like that. That's been something that's been on the table for a long time now. Easy to read documents, online signatures, easy access. And that's where portals, and it all falls under consumer duty. Digital innovation is starting to make all of this easier. There's a number of data cleansing systems coming in. There's a range of meeting note applications that are now available. You're automating meeting transcripts, and all of that is meeting the compliance requirements. So consumer duty is almost taking us back to the situation we were in 20, 30 years ago, where it's built on everything that's in there already, but it's taking it back to the basics in a lot of ways. I know it's creating a lot of paperwork out there, but it's coming back to that common sense approach.
Yeah, that kind of attempt to make digital communications more human, I guess. And there's a lot of that in consumer duty. In terms of how you mentioned that sometimes too much technology can be brought on board too quickly, there can be messy stacks, legacy tech. How have you seen these things doing client communications wrong impact the client advisor relationship?
I think everybody can get a little bit too clever with what they're trying to do. It's about keeping it simple. Ultimately, I run operational projects. I'm a consultant as well. And the message is out there, just keep it simple. So I was talking to somebody the other day and they had a myriad of different systems. I won't name which ones they were using. And they said, well, we've got a separate application that we're using for the cash flow modelling. And I said, well, why? You've got everything integrated with the other system you're using. Why don't you actually look at how you're streamlining that? Because ultimately, the client at the other end wants to be able to see everything very simply. They don't want to be logging in and out of all these different systems. In an ideal world, they have one point of access, which is through a client portal, or they might have a platform if a client portal isn't being used. They don't want lots of logins, and it's very easy to take on different pieces of technology and then going, right, just log into that. Actually, can you just send in that? We're sending you a link through that. Poor client is ending up going, well, actually, I've got 3 pieces of tech to log into. Which one shall I choose today? And very often you're looking at contacting a client once a year, might be for an annual review. So how do you actually tackle it on that side? So it is around trying to keep it as straightforward as possible.
There is a shininess to new technology, though. It's easy to get carried away because there is, like you say, the utopia. There's a utopia with all this new tech that things are going to be easier, they're going to cost less, etc., etc. Clients are going to be happier. How do firms balance that vision with, okay, we need to be focused and we need to streamline and we need to make sure that what we do is simplified?
Every firm needs to have their own tech strategy. So I've done a lot of training this year, and a lot of that's been around technology stacks and maps. So if you say to a firm, have you actually got it mapped out, everything that you've actually got? And then when new tech comes along, you can say, right, actually, how is that going to work? And instead, before, the knee-jerk reaction is, right, let's just adopt that and do that. And absolutely putting in a pilot to trial something like meeting notes is brilliant. But it's about making sure that whatever you take on, you're actually actively piloting, because you might take on a meeting note application, say Fireflies, and trial it for a while. And then that becomes the norm and people get attached to those pieces of technology. They don't want to give them up. It's always about having that plan through and making sure that whatever you're taking on, one, you're seeing the impact on any processes that you're putting into the business. You understand how it's affecting the advisor firm, and ultimately how it's actually affecting the client. And just been literally looking at this for one client recently who are looking at their client portal. And it is around what interlinks with their current technology stack and what's the end experience for the client. So you don't want to be sending out lots of different links and lots of different looks and feels out to the client. You want that uniform feel.
It's not just about the client though, is it? Because you've even got within advice firms, people of different ages, different sort of technological aptitudes or technological literacy that prefer different solutions and different ways of communicating with their clients. Ultimately, yes, their interest is in not alienating their clients and keeping the communication streamlined. How do you deal with those situations? How can firms make sure that the digital tools are enhancing every advisor's relationship with their clients rather than hindering it?
That's a complex one because, again, I've been out and about in the industry and hearing about Gen Z and how they interact. And the reality is the Gen Z, Generation Z, are very different to the baby boomers. So Gen Z are very comfortable with apps and online communication, but Word, Outlook, emails and Excel, they're the only commonplace tools in the workplace still, which is really interesting because the universities don't use Outlook. They have their own email exchange and they have done for years. So you're bringing people into the workplace at the moment who are very unfamiliar with the tools that were actually being used for a number of years. Gen Z tend to prefer text over voice messaging. They'll use social media platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and picking up the phone is really alien. So you're trying to mesh the different generations through. So you want to take up the new ideas, and it's important we do pick up the new ideas about how that communication works. We've also got to understand how people want to be communicated as well. And it's actually a bit of a fallacy that all older people can't use tech and all younger people are whizzing around on laptops. I actually go into a local school and help them with their CVs, and I've had youngsters coming along who are 16, 17 going, I'm not very good at tech, really sorry, I just can't do this. I know I'm much on the English side or do that, or they may be dyslexic or they can't see or hear. But we have to appreciate the different communicating methods in order to help both within the firm and the client. So firms are using Slack a lot more. So one of my clients, they use Slack all the time. It's great for the instant messaging. I know WhatsApp is also used in some firms as well, advisor firms, to communicate. As long as anything's secure and it meets the GDPR and the compliance regulations, it can be set up. So mobile phones, you look at facial recognition on your phone. You don't want to be logging in every time you go into your phone. I certainly don't. And that's really important, I think, about bringing that through. You can look at apps now. You can see all your applications online. You can see your investments. You can go in and see all the past performance that you've got in one place. It's really good. So it's bringing people in, younger people into the industry within the advisor firm, but making sure they can still communicate with the different generations coming through.
You mentioned there different people with different sort of technological aptitudes. Are there any methods that you use when you're going into a firm and you're deploying new tech that can help get certain people more familiar with new technology who might need that help?
Again, it's coming back to the training. And fortunately, a lot of the time you can change some of the ways the processes are working now. It used to be very much written down. So you've got to follow this process and bring it through. It's about making it more intuitive, going through systems. So you're not explaining every part of the process. You've got other guidelines there. You can use videos. So when we were doing some training internally for an advisor firm, and it worked really well, rather than getting everybody, so they wanted their peers to train the teams rather than bringing in separate trainers, which was a great idea. So we actually got them to record videos without any dialogue. So anybody could actually stand up and present with this video and just stop it when it got to the point where they wanted to give a bit more explanation. So the days are where you'd have to stand up and do a particular demo to go all the way through and say, this is what you do. You say, right, actually watch this. And you can watch it as many times as you want. But when I'm training out, it's very much, and this comes for training styles when you're communicating as well, everybody has different ways of learning. So some people will like to read, but most of the time, particularly these days, you want it to be intuitive. You don't want to be having to go into a different part of the system to find out that information. You want to click on it as you're going along. So you get pop-ups coming up. You get links through to other documents that you can read. So it's trying to keep it, again, as simple as possible, as informative as possible, as concise as you can. And then if people need individual training, you sit down and cope with them separately. On the other part, a lot of it is moving to self-serve.
That's really good practical insight. Are there any other sort of tips that you can share around the deployment of tech in terms of managing that project? You mentioned mapping the stack before. Yeah. What about sort of tracking the project through? I'm talking corkboards or Gantt charts and things like that.
Absolutely. So you're really into my territory around all of this. So again, it's coming back to your strategy. What are the new tools? Consider the why. What's it going to be a benefit? So you've got that right at the start. Then it's planning. So it's all about the how. So again, it's easy to run into rolling out new tools and not considering the impact and the communication plan for both the advisors and the clients. So you want to break the plan into phases. So I use Smartsheet for my project plans. It's online. You can get other people to actually be able to access those as well. I very often use PowerPoint for processes as well, because anybody can handle those. Visio is great. I'm working with one client that wants to use Visio at the moment. That's fine, but it's quite limited as to who else can actually get in and involved, because processes are living. They're not just do them once and put them through, but for the rollout, you want to be able to control that. So for instance, if you're looking at rolling out a new client portal, you want to think about how you're going to bring those clients on. So you might want to run a pilot and test the waters with a small group. And you want to include potentially some friendly clients and those who are not so friendly in terms of wanting to change. Because you get somebody who's really reluctant to change, and that includes within the advisor firm as well. They can be your biggest advocates, which is great. But one of the simplest ways to roll out a new client portal is to do it at the annual review. So you're actually signing clients up for that, because you've got to take them on that journey, saying, actually, we've got this new portal, we'd love to bring you on. Let's do that at this time. You can actually see the documents coming through, and we can get you to sign them all online. Because if you try and do that partway through the year when you haven't got that level of engagement with them, they're not going to do it. And you might not speak to them again for another year. Using case studies are really good as well. Everybody loves a story, and it's the positive outcomes from the change that are coming through. So it's about taking the advisor firm and employees there on that journey before you involve your clients. Because if your clients come back and you've got questions about what they're doing and people don't know internally, it's never going to work. So planning can take some time, and it can be a bit of a pain, but it pays off in the longer term.
It's interesting that you talked about portals there. We've been doing a lot of research around portals. I'm not sure if you've seen on how many portals and logins we all have access to, and how we might be able to use tech that's more customer centric, that kind of utilizes the channels that customers already use, like you mentioned, WhatsApp and Slack, text, email, where customers already are, to kind of push information from a portal to where they're already engaged. Are you seeing that happen a bit more within advice firms? They're doing more of this communication in and around the portal as opposed to everything happening within the portal?
Yes, and it's, portals are evolving all the time. There's portals out there that will allow you to send meeting notifications, you can upload your documents, you can get documents signed, which is really good. You can upload the documents back the other way. It's that communication piece through. So it does really work well. But you're right, the tech is wider than just the traditional tools that we're looking at. You've got Microsoft 365 as a tool of its own as well. So it's not just trying to integrate the tools that we know about, it's trying to integrate it with the wider suite and bring that through.
And we couldn't not mention AI as well. What trends, you mentioned Firefly earlier. What trends do you see in technology with regard to communications in advice firms?
There's actually quite a lot to think about in this area. The next decade, 2034, we're in 2024, coming towards the end of that. Most baby boomers will have retired. The youngest will be around 70. And I know there's some give with the dates and years and what people say, but you've got a cohort of retirees for whom technology will be the norm. They will have been around since it came in. But communication methods will still need to be tailored. You've got those older clients as well who are perhaps not able to handle the tech if they get to that stage in life. But at the same time, you've got Gen Z will be well into their 20s, dominating the workplace. So they'll be bringing their own technology approach. We're already seeing changing practices. There's large numbers setting up their own businesses. They're moving away from the 9-to-5 approach. Communication is much more about voice control as default. So they're not wanting to be writing everything down. I was watching a developer the other day. It was fascinating to watch him take a new web page design and enter it into a system. So it was just a design, hadn't been built. He put it into a system that wrote all the code there and then. And you could start critiquing that. So with that kind of innovation going on, that's just going to accelerate. You've got quantum computing coming through. You've got the 5G usage, a bit patchy at the moment. It's increasing. You're looking at immersive reality. We're already seeing meeting notes replacing the old telephone recording methods. So it's a godsend for transcripts. Some of the advisors are saying, I don't know, it's sort of constraining some of the free talking conversations you have because everything is now recorded, whether you like it or not. So you think, well, okay, but people adapt. System integration will become more sophisticated. A lot of people are saying got the plug and play and the APIs. It's been fettered APIs to date, but even those are beginning to open up. So there's more information coming through. So hopefully it'll become truly plug and play in the future. So if you do want to integrate with other systems, you can do so with ease. And people are becoming more self-sufficient. We're already seeing some clients are able to add and withdraw monies themselves, and this could become the norm. It's about constraints. You've got to make sure it's within the right advice framework, but it is becoming more of the norm. And you're seeing avatars already being used for repetitive training scenarios. That's likely to increase. So you've got advisor training to client education. So where you've got that over and over and you want to keep training people in, so you've got new people join the firm, or you've got new clients coming on that need to understand how their investments are working. You've got items explained in very easy and straightforward ways of doing that. We may get to the point where you get personal details of people who are actually stored in a more central location, which will freak a lot of people out, I know. But to be able to be downloading that for an advisor with minimal additions from a client, that could be another way. way. Taking withdrawals investments already mentioned. We could even see this driving more standardised documentation. I was talking last week about, what we all had a basic fact find that everybody used. And people came out from actually recreating the wheel to using something that can be used across the industry. But that might be my imagination running away with me. I don't know.
What about in terms of the journey that we're all on to get to grips with digital transformation itself? So when you go into firms now, if you mentioned all of that tech 20 years ago to an advice firm, they'd be like, I don't want to have to deal with all of that. But, we've all been on this journey to some extent now. When you go in, are people much more prepared to deal with these projects?
Yes. I would say on average they are. But innovation's been in the industry. I was involved with industry-wide initiatives going back to the early 2000s with contract inquiry. We're starting to get bonds submitted online. In some ways, it feels like the industry hasn't evolved. In other ways, you think when you look back that 20 years, how far it's all come on. It takes sometimes a big shove like the pandemic to get everybody. So you think before the pandemic, people weren't using online meetings to any great extent, or it was a hassle to try and connect it, within the advisor firms, and people preferred to actually meet up in person. But actually, you've got a real mix now of, meet up in person. Well, actually, we can do it just as easily online. So you're battling when I go into clients, you're battling how busy everybody is. And when people are really busy, they don't want to change that quickly. But once you start taking them on the journey and they start seeing the advantages of what you're bringing through, it's about working with them to get to that point. But you still got to go through the repetition at the other end to make sure that they are embedding it, are taking it on and where they are. So it's almost like 2 steps forward, 1 step back a little bit at times. So you're trying to bring that through. And as we're seeing firms come together, advisor firms come together with the consolidation, that brings its own level of complication. You're constantly trying to merge systems together, integrate teams together. And ultimately, it's a sales industry. It's an advisor going out to talk to a client. And we don't want to lose that. We want the tools to help that process. We want the tools to help with the segmentation, but ultimately that advisor needs to build that relationship with that client, whether it's online or in person or both.
Like you say, we've always been on this journey, but the tech's not getting easier. The tech stacks are not getting easier. We have 20 years of built up legacy technology as well as 20 years of innovation, and they come hand in hand. You can't take one without the other. Then you've got to merge legacy technology and you've got to unpick that stack whenever you want to integrate something new. I think we have to let you go, but thank you so much for your insights today. Where can we find you? Where can people find you online?
And it's been lovely to talk, Sam. Thank you so much. You can contact me. I've got an info at mintblueconsulting.co.uk. I've got a website at Mint Blue Consulting as well, so you can look me up online. I've also got a podcast that runs occasionally, the Change Curve podcast, which I run with some other really lovely people in the industry. And I'm out and about at different events as well. So please do come up and have a chat. Always happy to speak to people and might even see you at some of the industry events.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for your time, Helen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Sam.
Bye.